All right, so I suppose we might as well sort of get started here. If anyone else comes along, I'll just kind of fill them in. But yeah, welcome. As always, thank you for coming. Just to kind of start off with, we did actually have a couple of updates on the state side since our last meeting. So OCM recently met, considered a couple of documents here. I actually got a copy of one. If hard copy, if anyone wants to see, I'll just move it closer to the center. But this is what the state is calling its social and economic equity plan. It's essentially, if you read through it, it's not so much a hard and fast plan as a series of priorities that they're kind of looking at from the equity perspective. So it's discussing a lot of kind of general policy points that after looking at this, OCM feels are sort of general goals for the rollout of candidates in the state. There's some more concrete things, some things talking about addressing potentially predatory equity practices like loaning, because essentially this is still a new industry. It's still legal at the federal level, so there's some uncertainty. There's been some reluctance among larger lenders to provide equity to some of these smaller businesses. So there's some recommendations on how to address that kind of thing. There's a lot of recommendations in there. It's not so much a bulleted list, but it's definitely worth a look. There's a lot of interesting stuff. The other thing that's come out recently is kind of helpful for us here on the city level. They did recently revise their draft regulations for all this. And some of the things that they adjusted were just what areas we as a municipality kind of have discretion to regulate on. So in the past, we had talked a little bit about this idea of kind of creating additional buffer zones around other facilities in the community. So looking at things like private daycares, that whole issue. It actually looks like they've kind of walked back on that a bit in this current draft. They scrapped this sort of broad term they had passed, which was community facility, which is kind of open-ended. Now they're calling it youth facility. So youth, yeah.
Okay.
So essentially, whereas before it was kind of open-ended and it was talking about, there was actually at that stage kind of a lack of clarity as to exactly what was included. Now they have a pretty specific definition. If we wanted to establish an additional buffer zone, which we kind of stepped away from, but it's been limited down. So it's now only looking at government-owned and run facilities that are specifically providing services or recreation for people under 17 primarily. And there are other places too. In the past, we had this very kind of broad discretion to enact additional regulations that weren't something like unduly restrictive. I forget the exact language. But it's sort of been narrowed down now to a list of permissible things that we can regulate on. It's still fairly broad, but they have kind of looked at this and looks like they've narrowed it down a little bit. So we still have power to regulate things like parking, things like traffic control, odor, noise, but they've given us a bit more clarity and a bit less leeway on where we regulate. I don't think it really changes too much what we've done, because I think a lot of our discussions and stuff we want to see kind of fit into these categories. But if you do have a chance, I'm not sure if I sent this one around, but I can certainly send it after the meeting as well.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it'd be worth a look at this one as well. It's a little technical, but it's kind of a good look at what the state's thinking now. But before I go on too far, if there was anything that anyone was wondering about this that I can kind of follow up on more, any questions about the plan, about the draft regulations, anything that comes to mind, I'd be happy to take it with that.
No, but I can't wait to look at them.
Oh, yeah, I mean, certainly, it's right here. I mean, I'll send around
Okay, cool.
I'll send around a PDF copy later so that everyone can have a look at this, but, and this is just kind of specifically the municipal section, because this is where I was sort of digging in just to see what had changed.
Okay, I'm sorry. Did you send that around or you're going to send it around?
Go ahead and send it around after the meeting.
Okay.
I think I'm pretty sure the social and economic equity plan, that did go around in advance. I don't think we sent this one, so I'll make sure to send the PDF to everyone afterwards.
Did I read somewhere that there's a 1,000-foot buffer in between shops created by the state?
I believe so. I have to look at the exact specifics on that because it depends on the size of the municipality.
The
Yeah.
density of the area.
Yeah, there's a certain population threshold. So municipalities that are above a threshold have sort of a more relaxed buffer.
It looks
and
like a
ones-
million,
Is that it?
like a,
It's right in
well,
there.
I keep seeing that
Okay.
populations of a million or more, that looks like the delineation, but.
That
Okay,
comes
so
up-
for us,
I'm recalling seeing one where the threshold's at 20,000 people. If that's the case, we might actually be in the higher density category. But I'd have to pull that
So,
up.
yeah, you're right,
Is that it?
yeah. Yeah, distance requirements
Yeah, I believe so.
within a, right,
Okay.
having a population of 20,000 or more, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so I'm fairly certain that we actually fit into that higher category, which allows us to have things slightly more dense.
That's great, that's a great document, do you want to look at it?
I'll look at it after.
Yeah, I'll send it to you because it is a little dense,
Yeah.
but there's some good stuff in there. It's helpful. But that's essentially what the movement's been on the state front.
Do you, do you feel like this is like an evolving thing and like they're gonna come up with a new, okay, they're just gonna keep updating it, okay?
Yeah. There's stuff that's kind of clear and stuff that, in my opinion, has become a little bit less clear. So I mean, that's also just my read on it, but you can definitely see this is sort of an evolving thing. And that's also, I believe, the idea with this equity plan that they've issued. It's really, at this stage, still intended to be something that's kind of evolving, but with things changing as much as they are, but also with stakeholders looking to get involved, it's kind of, it's a draft, but you have to treat it with a bit of a grain of salt as well, because it's the best indication you have of where it's going to wind up going. But that's where we're at that right now. Yeah, sorry, Steve, I see you got a hand up.
Sure. Looking through the state's social equity paper,
Yeah.
I haven't gone through all of it yet, but there were a number of points that jumped out at me. Let's see, let me get to it here. They talked about barriers to entry and chief one being finances. Well, back up. First of all, they refer to a what did they call it? Sorry. Legislative introduction. Sorry. I'm glad to see that they started off with a preface on, intersectionality among other things, but oh yeah, seed to sale. They say that that the typical model in states is vertically integrated. That's not what we're doing here in New York State. Correct?
I'd have to look at the exact specifics.
I mean, we're not, retail dispensaries are not necessarily growing their own product.
Right. They do talk a lot about sort of this two-tiered divide, where you're talking about the retail side versus kind of the supply and distribution side, and actually the need to maintain kind of the integrity of that divide. That happens a bit more in the end. But I'd have to double check this. I think there may be some vertically integrated stuff happening with micro businesses, but I'd have to double check that.
Okay, but since apparently their surveys all turned up that to fulfill the social equity component, people need capital. Did we draft anything in our proposals, and can we do anything to kind of liaise with local financial institutions on this? And I guess even more than that, is some kind of marijuana commission going to be an ongoing city entity function, something? I mean, we're not going to fold up our tents at some point and just go away.
So at the current stage, I don't believe there's sort of a long-term city side thing that's planned, but that's also something that could potentially wind up being a recommendation, because I don't think it's something that we've totally sketched out that far beyond kind of this initial rollout stage.
Yeah,
As for kind of the equity side, I mean, that's definitely something that I'm less personally familiar with. I mean, there are certainly things that we can kind of look at that are less direct on the equity side, but also supporting these businesses in the form of, I mean, potentially looking at these kinds of small grants that might be used not necessarily for funding the actual business, but kind of providing this information and support outside of that. That's just off the top of my head. I'm definitely less familiar with kind of the finance side of it and how that would operate.
Okay.
And I know the state also has a program in place that they're looking to develop. That's something that the plan does get into.
There's also some talk about the need for education to assure that the social equity component is fulfilled. Oh God, I wish I had marked this better. Fuck. Excuse my language.
It's fine.
It says they're talking about incubation and the need for development of training programs by nonprofit organizations. Wouldn't it make sense for BOCES to offer a cannabis, I don't know, entrepreneurship program, or is, something along those lines? I mean, is that?
Yeah, I mean,
I feel like I
it's
saw that SUNY Ulster has something already.
something.
Yeah.
like-
Yeah. I'd have to find it, but I feel like I saw something related to cannabis.
Yeah.
New class coming to SUNY Ulster.
What about what is it, the rural co-op extension?
Cornell?
Is anybody familiar with that state? I mean, they offer all kinds of agricultural advice, right?
Cornell Cooperative, or
I'm sorry?
is you talking about Cornell Cooperative, or is this a
Yes.
different?
Yes, I think they have an office in the Kingston Mall, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Plaza, yeah.
Yeah.
But I just looked it up. Yeah, there's marijuana courses all over the place now,
Yeah.
from Syracuse University to Ulster Community College.
Oh, very cool. Well, should the city take an interest in seeing, do what we can to boost access and awareness of that?
I can't find it.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
Well, just more questions, but I am particularly curious about, if there's going to be an ongoing, some point person within the city bureaucracy.
Well, we did break that into, our recommendations.
Yeah.
A liaison, right? Somebody like that.
Yeah, well, tax revenue should be used to provide public-facing information that helps Kingston residents, blah, blah, blah. That would include also the map, setting up an office or a helpline to answer questions.
Okay, there you go. Right. Okay.
Okay. So I think that actually works as a decent transition here, because kind of the other big thing that I want to hit tonight is to take this sort of draft memo that we've started to put together based on stuff we've kind of discussed, some recommendations for using the revenue that we're expecting to get. Kind of tweak that, edit that to something the task force is happy with, or get it closer to a form that we're happy with, that will ultimately send off to the common council to kind of have a look at this and ultimately adopt it. So with that, a lot of these things, and this is kind of the interesting thing with that state plan as well. It's kind of giving us a hint of where the state might be heading, but a lot of it kind of lines up with stuff we've been talking about too, and stuff that we've been wanting to see. And it's not necessarily mutually exclusive. So we can kind of look at this and get a rough idea of what they're thinking about, but we can still definitely suggest the stuff that we would like to see happen here. Then we can figure out the specifics later once we get to that stage. So I'm going to try and share this up on my screen and really kind of turn it over to you guys here. if there is anything that kind of jumps out that you'd like to adjust, I'm, just going to be kind of editing on the fly here. Can everyone see this all right? Yeah, it's the same thing that I sent around a little bit earlier in the week. But yeah, I'm good to go, hopefully.
I like your second sentence.
Second one?
Marijuana.
Yeah, that's a
That's
weird
how
one.
they spell it. I know, I had to Google it to make sure.
It's great.
Oh, okay, you did edit it. Yeah,
So I kind of took some of the recommendations you had sent, some of the stuff that we had discussed just generally, and kind of tried to condense it down into something that kind of hits mainly on revenue uses, but kind of emphasizes some of the other things we've just discussed in general.
I mean, one of the things that I would like to add to it, and I don't know where, or, maybe in the beginning, but like I was saying before, that everything should be in the spirit of full transparency. That is like the decision-making process, the actual regulations, any information, just how that, how and why. Everything should just be in full transparency
Okay,
as much as possible.
so I think that might wind up being a bit more of a substantial section, but potentially putting that right near the beginning and just kind of saying that this is something the task force would like to emphasize up front with anything that ends up being done.
Can you, Jonathan,
Hmm.
the tax revenues are collected first by the state?
So it's a bit complicated. I'm gonna try and break this down to the best as I understand it. But essentially, there are going to be two different pots of funding. There is this sort of direct flow of money that is going to be, as I understand it, collected by the state and then sent back to us, that we'll have access to kind of the tax revenue. Then there's a separate pot of funding that we can access by grant. So it's not essentially money that we get automatically, it's money that we have to apply for specific use. And that's generally stuff that's directed more towards equity uses. There's, in the law itself, there is a list of kind of example uses, and it gets into a lot of different things. Access to healthcare, access to corrective justice, educational opportunities, recreational opportunities, all these different things. So it's very broad, but it is on grant.
But it's separate from general revenues and dedicated.
That's correct, yeah. But I mean, at this stage, it's really just recommendations for use of money, and then kind of figuring out exactly which pot of money we draw from, but what we want to do with it essentially.
Any idea where the money is held?
So that's something I'm a little bit further away from. I don't totally get into the financial side of things. Yeah, I don't want to say something that's off base here because I've been trying to kind of get a handle on how the financial side of things work, but I think that would be a question for the comptroller, but that is something that I can figure out.
I'd like to see it. I mean, I assume there are relatively progressive-minded financial institutions and some less, progressive. I mean,
I see what you're saying, yeah.
are there community banks? I mean, could those funds be held, for community benefit until dispersed?
I mean, I'd have to look. I think ultimately it would stay with the municipal account, but I don't know exactly kind of what the architecture is for that.
Okay, questions are easy.
Yeah, this is really hopefully as much as possible, kind of opening it up to you guys. If there's additional things that you'd like to see going into this letter, things that you'd like adjusted, and any of that.
Can you go to 4?
Yeah. Let me bring that up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay. You fixed all the things that I found.
Oh, cool. Okay. So one question that I had in general, and this, I mean, this may not even be something, but do we want to present this stuff in any particular order? I kind of just went in on it. I did move the affordable housing one up, so I guess that's sort of a sub question, if that's something that we want to keep where it is. But if we want to arrange this in any particular way, present it in any particular way, anything jumps out on that?
Jonathan, do you know how many of those line items we come up with match what their plan is looking for us to spend tax on, or
So,
grants for?
They
oh,
didn't,
yes.
they didn't get into like even that specifics like that.
Okay,
Yeah, it's so very general. And there's no specific kind of, that I saw, I don't know. Was that your feeling as
because
well?
I'm guessing that the grant side of things, if we matched up our stuff with that grant portion,
Mhm.
we definitely get that money to do those things.
Yeah,
And then that other tax money could be like the other wish list kind of stuff that doesn't line up with where the grant money should go to, if that makes sense, right? Because that's like a home run.
yeah,
Let's get the grant money for this, put that in place.
that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Do that right off the back.
So I know, probably the education things and, housing issues and things like that. I would say those are definitely in those grant guidelines.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I would be interested in, the common council making a commitment to go get that money first. And then you could put the other tax, which is gonna be probably far less, into a general fund.
got it.
Because the grant may even come down to, actually hiring people, mandating hiring of people to run programs. So that'd be my suggestion,
Definitely. Yeah,
since you're dealing with two different revenues.
yeah, no, that's a good point. So, and I may just look at the arrangement of this too, just to kind of reflect that a bit, to kind of break it down to sort of the equity target things and the kind of things that would be maybe more addressed by the general tax pot. Okay, that's definitely something I can look at. So let's see. So maybe just, yep, oh yeah.
Do we really want to lead with housing? I mean, I don't underestimate how important that is, but I sort of think that it would be better to go in order of direct relation to the new marijuana, laws. For example, that
Number 2.
yeah, 2 or 3. I mean, 3 only because it has to, I don't know, it's the most directly on point, as far as the mechanics of what we're getting into, isn't it?
Yeah, I would lead with number 2 just because it's so equity focused and that should be, but I was thinking the same thing,
I
Steve,
agree.
about number 1.
Yeah.
I mean, they're still all on the list, it's just, we could just lead with equity and then get into.
Yeah, because otherwise it looks like we're a grab bag, a wish list.
Yeah. That's
You know,
interesting. Okay, so if I move that up to item 1 there, and then, I mean, we'll not necessarily keeping affordable housing at any particular spot, but just moving that first and foremost.
Well, I
So-
like the youth program stuff as a second one because that's always winning politically.
Yeah.
I mean, we're trying to sell the council on this, right?
Yeah, yeah, this is, so ultimately, this is going to be what the task force is kind of recommending as their priorities. So if there's a way that you want to prioritize it, or if you want to specify that it's not a priority, or not in order of priority, they are priorities, but not in order of priority, that's another option. Essentially, however you want to be presenting this as kind of direction to the council of the city.
Well, maybe we could insert a sentence to that effect. You know, these are not in order of priority,
Definitely.
but you know, they're in order of political palatability.
Well, I don't know if we have to pull back the curtain quite that much.
Yeah, no. Good way to put it.
Let's see.
But we had transparency here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we are recorded. Okay, so that may wind up just being, it's almost looking like there's going to be kind of a second paragraph here at the beginning, just kind of explaining some of what our rationale was, and kind of how it's organized. And then again, just emphasizing this transparency point again, because that is a recurring theme of all of this, I think. Okay. So then looking at item number 1 here, I did kind of just recreate some of the things that we had discussed based on list of recommendations that Amberly had sent along, but also just the things that we had discussed. At this point, are there any other kind of bulleted items that jump out to anyone that seem like they should be included front and center here with this recommendation?
Can we see 3? I can't see 3 and I can't see past number 2 right here. Is that,
Yeah, I was just talking about paragraph number 1, but we can also
Oh.
move ahead. But,
uh,
Go ahead, sorry.
if anyone else just has any general opinions about kind of how it's worded, how it's arranged, anything like that, just kind of starting with this first block.
I think 3. I think 3 should be 2. You know,
Yeah, I feel that way, yeah,
Moving that up as well.
yeah.
Liz, I saw you come off mute for a second there. Was there something you'd want to say?
Nothing. I just wanted to ask, we have to decide on this tonight, or is it something that we can look over and kind of send you some information tomorrow or maybe the following day?
Yeah, definitely. This is just kind of getting this in front of the task force now, talking about it, but anything you want to send me, we won't send
Okay.
it off.
Okay, because I printed it out. I'm gonna look it over and then okay. I just want to make sure I don't want to feel like I'm pressured, but it's good
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to, yeah.
All
But
right.
absolutely, it's when the group is ready with it, so not a hard
Okay.
time.
Thank you. Thank you.
I am hearing a couple of people wanting to move this one up, sort of on this informational question. So I'm going to test that out here and see what that looks like. Okay, so now we're sort of going directly from this equity and sort of restorative justice base point, moving into this providing information to the public.
And then 3 should be the youth program one.
So we can move that up. That.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so now just kind of going down the list, we're gonna build out this first section here a little bit, talking about kind of why we've chosen, well, not necessarily why we've chosen, but kind of how it's organized, kind of structure of the thing. So that's clear. But then from there, starting the discussion, again, with this justice-based point, moving more into the information, then into the youth-facing stuff. At this point, I've got affordable housing, the sort of general point pushed down to 4. So that's good. And then from there, they get a little bit further away from the MRTA itself. So I think that actually does fit.
I like number 6 higher up.
Number 6.
That's just me.
Okay.
I'm afraid it's closely related. It's more closely related. Never mind.
No, this is exactly what we're doing.
I recently bought a product in another state that had a label on it said, very potent, may cure psychosis, cause psychosis.
Oh, God.
Cure or cause?
Cause. What they don't know, psychosis is the cure.
Hmm. Okay, so that's something we could look at here. So if we were potentially moving that up again, having that maybe closer to the information side, you're saying?
If it's me, yes.
Okay, we can test that out. I mean, as always, just anyone who wants to jump in, but I think that's a fair way of doing it.
I mean, I was an editor professionally for some time, so I'm going to be incorrigible.
Absolutely. I encourage encourageability.
What is this? What is the leading in this? Is there in the concluding summary 2 statements? In conclusion, the city must ensure that tax revenue used to actually help the people who contributed it. I don't. Oh, you mean who bought the products, who patronized the businesses?
I think that's generally the idea, but I mean, this is all stuff that's kind of open to tweaking.
I thought it was more to make amends for prohibition. Also, a lot of the buyers of this stuff, are people with high amounts of disposable income. It's not like there's a social equity. There's no correlation between consumption and social, standing.
Yes.
I mean,
I just don't like that language.
Will you just pull it down a little bit? I'm sorry,
doesn't-
Jonathan.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me. I'm trying to make heads and tails out of that sentence, but maybe it's just me.
You can certainly adjust it. Let's see. I'm just going to highlight it for now, since this is kind of where we are talking. Did you mean that way, Liz, or up the other way?
Go the other way, but whenever you're done, I just want to I'm trying to tweak my notes to fit what you're changing it to so I can get an idea.
Gotcha. Oh, that was good. Okay. I'll set it here for now. Okay, so I'm kind of hearing this emphasizing sort of the restorative side of this, the equity side of this. So not to make it too high stakes, but are there kind of some key points that we want to articulate in this conclusion then?
Well, we want to ensure that the revenue is used to help the people who are most harmed. You know,
Yes,
alleviate the burden from, our local population and to help the people who have contributed into it.
yeah,
Uh, So alleviate burden of,
I mean, when I look at like, especially the youth program one, and like funding educational programs and, school field trips and everything, that is, that's not necessarily helping, consumers of the product, but it's alleviating the burden for just parents and for community members and just, um, it kind of helps in every arena of life when you're helping families out, local families.
yeah, so
It spills over into so many other things,
sort of that generational investment.
Yeah, love it, yes.
I just make a note of that. So it's not necessarily going to be word for word, but just kind of trying to get the key points I'm hearing come up in this discussion.
And like the informational stuff, that helps, that does kind of directly help the people who are paying this tax,
Mhm, mhm.
And so that's how, it helps them. So that's how it helps like the people who have contributed into the revenue.
Just kind of building my notes here. So I think this is definitely a section where we can really kind of rework it to kind of very concisely state the big picture items for the task force.
Yeah.
So this also might be something good to kind of to take even away from this meeting if people have specific things that they want incorporated into this conclusion.
Yeah.
Just to kind of keep the discussion going on the, not to cut it short here, but to also keep it going on the email thread or wherever else we wind up, just to kind of have that written.
I mean, to me, like I want to use the tax revenue to really like we're building the community we want to live in. We're creating the community we want to live in. And that is in so many different aspects, but it feeds into this whole, wonderful helped community. Everybody gets a boost, kind of.
Yeah.
Further along that, I mean, instead of referring to help the people who have been most harmed, shouldn't we say help the communities that have been most harmed? Isn't that more?
Yeah.
I think that's, sells it a little better.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Okay, so I'm definitely seeing that this is going to be a section that gets kind of, there's going to be a lot of tweaking that happens here, but I can definitely build this. Okay. Any final points here? Might move back up into the recommendations for a sec, just to get to kind of the last couple that we didn't hit. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, so now we've discussed this a little bit. So let's have a look back and just kind of look at some of the bullet point items just to see if there's anything that I kind of missed as I was summarizing this, anything else that would be good to include in these sections. So looking now at this point 2 here on the information that we want to be providing. So first one I've got here is something that's come up a lot, this idea of a map that kind of shows the buffer zones, potentially where the businesses are, and then let's see, municipal resources. So I think this would definitely, this goes to that recommendation about kind of having an ongoing point person. If I don't have that as a specific thing, then we definitely want that there. I'm gonna make a little comment. Okay.
Yeah, or team, person or team, you know.
Okay. Moving over to the top of this. Okay, can I get this that way? Yeah, that's a little bit better, I think. Okay. So then we have this question, or this idea also of kind of creating signage to just encourage responsible use. That's something else that's come up in the past, is this idea of sort of having this contest to increase public engagement. So we've got that right up in front, right in the recommendations. Anything else that kind of jumps out to anyone in terms of information that we want to be providing, kind of how we want to potentially be organizing that and funding that? Anything that I've missed that comes to mind?
I think that's all we talked about in that area.
Okay,
Right.
cool.
What did you say?
I think that's all we talked about. in
Yes,
that area.
yeah.
Okay. So then having a quick look at this section then on more youth-facing stuff. So I've got a couple here that have come up. So trying to provide some more school trips, potentially providing funding to groups in the community to offer programs like this. This is one that's kind of come up in passing, the sort of environmental programming question. I haven't built it out too much, but I kind of included a note there. I mean, just in general under the sections, or anything else that should be added, things that should be adjusted.
So we say like we're gonna be there funding environmental education, that be private or like city run? Like, does that need, do we need to emphasize which programs, like? Would it be like a Forsyth nature, kind of a thing, or would it be like Susie's outdoor adventures kind of a thing?
It could be, it could be.
Okay, so
Yeah.
wide open.
Yeah,
Okay, we don't need to. Because I don't know if that's one of those things where, the grant would help a city do something as opposed to somewhat of a private nature.
I see what you're saying.
I wish that it was more specific with what they wanted to
Right.
fund, but it seemed to me that it was very broad.
Okay.
And I also included this final point here about kind of special consideration about making these programs accessible to individuals with special needs, just in as much as possible emphasizing this inclusivity aspect of it.
Yeah.
Are people generally happy with that kind of language, how I have it worded now, or are there things would be things you'd like to see adjusted? Okay. So then moving right along to the next one. So we've got this issue of mental health services in general, kind of using this funding to address that issue generally, but we have some pretty specific recommendations on that. These mobile crisis units, potentially providing some funding to that. Then a couple of other recommendations here. Steve, I remember you kind of called this up a bit earlier. Is there anything that kind of jumps out to you on this that could be added, could be adjusted?
Nothing jumps out at me, no.
Okay. And again, I'll make some of these tweaks for discussing now and then send this around again so we can have like a look at the hard copy. And
Well, though, actually, I mean, do we need that thing about suicide prevention? Is there some correlation between marijuana use and suicide?
Well, it's not a bad thing to have. It's not a bad thing to have in there. And Um, I'm a veteran, and we're dealing with, we've all heard, 22 deaths a day, veteran suicide. We have help from the VA, et cetera. We have 22 until none. I personally would like to see some sort of something incorporated in there like that. Maybe not specifically calling out veterans, but now that we have recreational legal, and I spoke about this before, where we can't get any help. I had to seek outside help, outside doctors, because the VA cannot. They cannot recommend, marijuana use. But in any event, so the suicide, yeah, I don't see that as a bad thing.
Oh, I don't see it as a bad thing. No.
Well, or I don't see it as something that maybe should not be excluded. I think it's a positive thing to have in there. It's not going to hurt,
Okay. I'm not going to argue that, certainly.
Yep. And that's also a good spot too. It's fairly brief at this point, but if there's any kind of more specific thing that may be useful there on that point, where we could be looking at funding, at local helplines, at maybe nonprofit groups that are providing these sorts of services, if there's any sort of additional specificity that'd be helpful there. Or it could be fine just as it is, but if there's anything that comes up on that. And again, like if anything comes up in the coming weeks, just absolutely send it along.
The idea of having the mobile crisis unit could really respond to any number of, mental health episodes. So it could be suicide, it could be, veteran services, it could be psychosis, it could just be somebody freaking out, man, so, it's just like a range of things.
So it might be worthwhile to expand this language a little bit then. Just so it's not sounding like it's limited to just psychotic episodes, but just sort of more generally providing that kind of first responding mental health care.
Yeah, definitely.
Do we mention substance abuse anywhere in this?
I believe in a previous, yes, including the treatment of substance abuse disorders.
Okay, I see it there.
Okay, so that's looking like it's in a decent form for the time being. So next we've got this section on affordable housing. It's wound up down at the 5th point now. I think that looks generally good, but is there anything to tweak? Anything I can add there? Any language that you'd like to see adjusted? Okay, so I think we're probably decent on that. Moving along to our final couple here before we wrap up for the night. So we do have a couple of more general environmental sustainability goals that have been raised in the past, because there definitely has been conversation in the past about using some of this money to kind of invest in our public spaces, our green spaces. This is kind of the language I landed on based on recommendations I've heard from this group. Usual song and dance, if anything looks, anything could be adjusted or improved. Okay, so our last couple of things then. We have had this suggestion come up a couple of times about having some sort of investment in our public transportation, looking both just at primarily kind of at this intoxicated driving concern that's been voiced a lot of times within this group, but also just more generally having this available. I've got it down fairly low on the list right now because it does, in my mind, feel like something that, like Joe's been saying, is a little bit further away from kind of like immediate equity concerns. And it's also something that's, it would definitely, well, I don't know quite how to describe it, but it feels a little bit more distant. And that might just be me, but if anyone else would like to adjust
It's
that.
not like an immediate use for the money, it's like something more down the line, yeah.
Exactly. Okay, cool. And then the final point that we have here, sort of this sub-grant program. Again, this is something where it feels like it would take a little bit more, just like figuring out how it would work. But I think it's also just in general like a good idea because it sort of is almost like a gap filler in some way.
Yeah.
So I think it fits well at the end. But it's also something where it does feel like the financial side is a little bit tricky and takes a little bit more technical expertise to put together in language for recommendation, which is just why I have it there. But if there's anything that I could add here at this point, I like the thumbs up. Okay.
Wait.
Oh,
I thought my hand was up.
you were giving me a thumbs up.
A thumbs up. Well, I could get that too, of course. Is there anything in here about an annual report about how, or, monthly report or something about how the revenue stream is being dispersed?
Ooh, that could be in the transparency
Transparency.
paragraph.
Yeah.
Steve, that's
Really good, really.
Okay, I get a thumbs up too.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of support for that one, so that's a big one.
Yeah.
Definitely. That might actually just wind up being a whole separate recommendation, like a numbered point, because I feel like that's a fairly big one.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Cool. I'm gonna put a 10 on that right now, just so I can't count. So that would be, okay, there we go. Okay. So, and then we've been over the conclusion a bit, but after we've kind of talked over the rest of this, anything else that seems like it could kind of fit there? Okay. All right, so I think we've done a very thorough pass on this at this point. There are a lot of notes here. I'm gonna take this back, try and incorporate some of this. Hopefully have a fresh version of this document out, I think like early next week, circulated to the group. If you have any recommendations, I think this is a good place to even add it on the email chain, just so we have the discussion. But continue to revise this, then depending on where we feel about it, again, the ultimate goal is to get this document into a form that the task force is happy with, that everyone feels comfortable signing off on. Send it first to one of the Common Council's committees, subcommittee that focuses on a particular area. This one is likely going to go to finance and audit because the financial aspects of using the tax revenue. But get it in front of them, they'll discuss it, figure out the specifics of that, whether we want to, how we want to present it to them, of course. And then from there, it'll ultimately go to complete council. So that's generally what we're looking at here. I think we've got a decent roadmap. So if anyone has any final things for tonight before we wrap up a minute or so early here.
Has anyone for the city of Kingston projected any kind of tax revenue? Say like for one store, two stores, three stores?
I don't think so for Kingston specifically. I have seen some figures like that on the state level. I remember there was a specific figure talking about how many jobs they expected to add statewide. I don't know if it's gotten specifically revenue yet, but I would have to double check the plan, but there may be some, but it's not something I'm aware of, certainly not for Kingston specifically yet. All right, so with that, I think we will wrap up for tonight. make these edits, and I'll send the thing back around, and we'll see where we go from there. So, great. Thank you so much, everyone. As always, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Good stuff.
And of course.